we are ready for our next painting video. I hope you enjoyed the last one. This one, you're going to need to know a little bit about how to shade a sphere. So if you haven't taken the Shading a Sphere class or the Drawing 101 class, which discusses how a sphere is and how you paint light on it or draw light on it, you're going to need to do that before you continue with this video. Well, you don't need to, but it would be a very good idea to be helpful. Plus, it's part of the educational series, so why not do it, right? Knowing how to shade a sphere, whether it is through drawing or painting, is super important in painting everyday things. And we're going to be doing a flower with a cup shape today, and it is very important that you know how that works. So, as you can see over here, I'm going to bring this over. This is the sheet that you're going to get an example of, okay? This sheet has been sketched out for you like your canvas will be. It'll be very similar. And you can see that there's arrows with lines on the sheet. This is directional brush strokes, okay? So when we use our brush, it won't necessarily be this one, we are going to follow along with the pattern of those lines. Okay, so there is a lot of directional brush stroking today. And that's an important part of painting, because brush strokes tell a story, as we discussed before with lines, right? So we're also going to have a couple of other things going on in the background. We're going to work in a blurred background because things that are in front of us are easier to see. Things that are far away are less easy to see. So when you make your background objects kind of blurry, it makes the things that you paint towards you feel like they pop out. And that makes it look a little more realistic. So we're going to be learning about how those things work today too. Now you probably should have your primary colors together. Remember, you have your yellow, you have your blue, and you have your red. Okay, and don't forget you have your black and your white. You can make a paint palette out of just about anything. Remember, as always, you can always use a garbage bag and lay that down. One, for safety to keep your area clean if you have a nice table. And for two, just to make sure that you have something to paint on and mix your paints with. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to start out and I'm going to get out my Filbert brush. Now, if you remember from our last painting, the Filbert brush looks like this, where it's rounded on the top, but it's flat on the side. Okay, and that's because since it's rounded, it's really good at blending. Remember our pendulum swing that we did last time? That pendulum swing tapers off the edges. So we probably won't be using too much pendulum swing today, but we are probably going to be using a lot of Filbert because this is a painting that has soft edges on it, and we're going to want a soft edged brush, a brush that's rounded instead of one that's very flat. So the first thing we're going to do is we want to work on our background. You don't have to, as we discussed before. A lot of artists paint their foreground first and then patch in their background as like a style technique. But for our purposes, we're going to do this first so that you remember and train your brain to think of things in the background as blurry, things that are closer to us as detailed, color saturated, whether bright with color, and that we can also just kind of see them in focus a little bit better. So first things first, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to make a background that is probably a little bit of bluish up top, okay, and then it starts to get down to green at the bottom. And we're going to be real mishmashy about it, and what I mean by that is we're not going to try real hard. It sounds kind of funny, but when something's far away, it has something called bokeh in it. That's the optical effect that happens in photography when a light or something in the background becomes blurred as opposed to something in the foreground. So to make a bokeh, we want to keep things kind of blurry and messy in the background. And you can see here that I have on your paper, lazy and blurry in the background. And then there's lines here that says incomplete, okay? We don't need to show every perfect little detail in our background either. That's something that our brain, one, doesn't care about, and two, isn't really necessary to communicate a nice painting. So we don't worry about it too often. It's a stylized choice, and I think it's a nice way to learn. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a light blue to start up with. So you need white. So go ahead and get yourself a little pile of white, put it off to the side. You won't need too much of it because we're going to be doing kind of a scrub, a scumble. So I have my white, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to get just a little touch of my blue. Remember to always get your color off to the side. That might actually be a lot of blue. Well, that's not too bad. We want a nice soft kind of babyish blue. Don't go too bright on your blue. You can always add a little bit in as we go. All right, So what we're gonna do is you wanna make room for yourself, and we're gonna go up to the top of our painting, right up here. And all I'm gonna do is in the background, I'm going to kind of patch in, and I can turn my brush any way I want to kind of scrub the background of my painting with this blue color. Now there's these blobs up here, and those are gonna be the colors of our flowers that are kind of floating in the field later on. So you don't want to cover those totally, but you can go over a little bit of the edges, that's okay. The blobs are just there to kind of help your brain remember where to put color later. Remember that when you cover something in a drawing, all you're doing is covering something that you have to decide if it's important to you, because I put it there thinking it may help you figure out the shape and the size of things, but if it becomes too much trouble and you need to paint over it to accomplish your background, that's okay. So don't worry about it. Not a big deal. So I'm going to go around this flower here, and I'm using my brush. I'm using the thick side. You can use it like that, or you can turn your brush sideways and make little dashes around too. Okay, and once again, don't worry if it's not perfect. Not really worried about it. Doesn't really matter. We can paint over it. Okay, so we have that patched in our background like that. Like so. And as we go upward, not downward, if we go up here, we're going to want a little bit more blue. So what we're going to do is we're going to tap it over here. So I got some blue. I'm going to tap it off to the corner over there like this. And remember, I do a little skippity bop like this. And then I'm going to go up into my sky, and I'm going to stipple. I'm just going to go ahead and smush down here and there like that in a couple spots. Pick a couple little areas like that. It doesn't matter where it is. Doesn't matter at all. Just make sure it's towards the top. I'm going to do that again, a little bit over here, like that, a little bit there. And then leave what's on your brush and gently go back and forth like this. And that'll kind of randomly distribute some of the color throughout the sky. And you can use your brush strokes going back and forth like this. If your paint already dried, no problem. Just wait a couple seconds and add in some more of the lighter blue again. All right, we just want to see some change up of that. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go down and I'm going to add a little bit of white into this area. Right underneath here, it's still a light blue, it's still wet. Okay, and I'm adding some white. I'm not even cleaning my brush off, okay? You don't have to clean your brush off for this part, not necessary. Go back up there a little bit, same thing. I'm gonna go over to the edge of my flowers. I'm gonna turn my brush sideways and make these little dashes to help myself out. Go back up here a little bit, going downward like this, moving around, going down. Notice how I go over my stem a little bit? That's okay, don't worry about it. If you went over your stem, it is not a big deal. You can paint right back on top of it. Now, as we go downward, we're going to start picking up even more white, so it gets lighter and lighter blue. Same thing. And I'm not trying to blend it out perfectly. You can leave little chunks of darker and lighter colors next to one another. That is okay. Not a big deal. Okay, so we're going to bring that down. Now we're using a lot of white down here, okay? And we're bringing it all the way down around our flowers like this, about this far down. You can go a little farther up or downward, it's okay, either one is fine. Okay, and notice how it's not pure white because I didn't clean my brush off. I'm not worried about that. Okay, so I'm gonna go up here. I'm gonna scumble a little bit like this. Scumble, remember, is a little bit of scribble. I'm going to scribble my background a little bit in between, and I'm just kind of scribbling in weird little circles. So add some texture to our background, and it's just fun. It's part of brush strokes. In art, we can make things look really realistic, like a photograph we want, or we can have fun with it and throw in brush strokes. Since we have a brush, why not make it look kind of funky? Okay, so now we have that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up some white, and I'm going to move it over to the side here. We need to make a spring green. Do you remember how to make a spring green? I'll give you a second. You need two colors. You need green, or I'm sorry, you need blue. Add a little bit of blue, and then you need red. Just kidding, haha, it's yellow. You need blue and yellow. Keep your eye on your tones. Get the extra off there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the side and get a pretty decent scoop of yellow, because remember, yellow is thin. And I'm going to add it to a little bit of that white paint here. Okay? So to get the spring green, we need yellow, blue, and some white. Now I went a little heavy there on the white. That's okay. I can always add more of the yellow and the blue to saturate it or make it a deeper color. So I'm going to go just a little bit below where we stopped painting, and I'm going to go right here like this. I'm going to fill in the areas in between my flowers like so, like that. Not thinking too hard about my direction of my brush strokes, doesn't really matter. Like so. Brush stroking all around. Gonna go around my flower up here, like that. Over there as well, all the way around. Gonna kind of fill in just a little bit in between, going into my stems a little bit. Don't really care, doesn't really matter. And then I'm gonna fill in the areas up here too. So I'm gonna kind of stop right where we kind of stopped by our paint up here, because we're going to do something a little different. In just a moment, you're going to want to see how to do that. You can turn your brush in your hand like this to get in different areas, okay? And we're using a bigger brush because we're trying to cover more surface area. When you use bigger brushes, it keeps the way your painting looks more loose. If you use a medium brush, it can tighten it up a little bit. If you use a small brush, it can really help with details or getting in small places, but you don't want to cover large areas with a small brush usually. Some people do. Remember that a brush is just a tool, and like anything, you can use it whichever way you want. Any tool that you want in the world, you can change how you use it. So you can drink out of a cup, or you can use it to smash a walnut, right? If you really need to. So tools are whatever you make them. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get some white right on my brush, and I'm going to go right up here on the top of the green area, and I'm going to smush back and forth like this. Smush and smush and smush. I'm going to go upward, and when I'm doing this, I'm making little brush strokes like this. Some of them are going to go into my flower that's up there. That's okay. I'm going to go a little bit into this like that, going back and forth. Okay, same thing, I'm gonna put a little bit in here. Okay, and then what you wanna do is you wanna add some dashes back and forth all the way around with some of the white that you have that's here, like this. Some dashes back and forth between everything you have. Okay, here and there, looks good. Same thing, we're gonna add some back and forth over here. Here and there, letting it sit for a minute up there. And remember, you can go into your petals, don't avoid them, because what's going to happen is you're going to get a weird line around everything, like you're avoiding it, and it's going to look like everything's a ghost, or like your flowers are trying to hide from us or something. It's going to be weird, so we don't want to do that, okay? And we're just making dashes in all kinds of different directions down there. All right, looks pretty good. So now what we're going to want to do is we're going to take a little bit of our spring green color that we have here. We don't want too much of it on there. Remember, you want to coat your brush so that it is on the top part of the brush. Mine's a little messy at the moment because of scooping, but you don't want too much paint to go past the middle of the brush, okay? Not unless you're covering a great big area or you're pressing down and scumbling. So what I'm going to do up here is I'm going to turn my brush this way, the thin way like this, not the big flat way. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to press down in different areas and make long brush strokes like this, here and there. Okay, and don't try to make them perfect, and bring some of them down this way like this. down further, like that. And what this is going to do is it's going to make our field of flowers later feel like there's floating leaves out there, okay? Doesn't look super impressive right now, but remember, it feels blurry in contrast to the things that are going to feel nice and clear up front. So we're going to let that sit there for a second. What you're going to want to do now is you're going to go ahead and clean off your brush. Remember, plunge and swirl, plunge and swirl, plunge and swirl. You want to get the extra water off. Try not to get it on your canvas like I just did. Whoops. I got a little bit down there. If you get that, make sure you hit it right away with your brush because it will eat right through your paint and go down to your canvas, and then that area will be white when everything else is painted. And that's always a bummer. So what we need to do next is we need to put in some darker colors. So as we discussed before, you can make a dark green 2 different ways. Do you remember what they're called? There's 2 names for them. A shade, which is adding black, right, to a green, or there is complementary, which is adding the opposite color on the color wheel. And if we remember correctly, what's across from red? Green. So we want a pure green, so we're going to put a little bit of blue right here, like that. I'm going to clean off my brush, get the extra off, and then I'm going to get a big old fat scoop of yellow, like this. I'm going to put it over there, and I'm going to give myself a nice secondary green, which means kind of equally mixed. It's a little on the pale side, but that's because these pigments aren't as deep as other paints, but they're perfect for beginners. Okay, so we have a beautiful green there. It's really vibrant, but what we really want is some darker green. So I'm going to leave some green there, regular green that we made. I'm going to put some green over here because we don't want too much of it. I'm going to add a little bit of black, just a teensy bit to this green. I'm going to make it darker. And then I want to make it a little olivey color. And to do that, I'm going to use a little bit of red. So black will make it darker, red will make it darker, but black will make it kind of like a murky sky, like a tornado-y sky color, but red will make it kind of an olivey-ish color. So you don't want a lot of red, you just want a little bit, because if you do too much, it will almost look purple sometimes. All right, let's see there, that's pretty good. That's what I'm talking about. That's the color we're looking for right there. So I'm going to get most of the paint off. And the reason for that is that sometimes when you paint, you don't need a lot of paint. You have to use an area to make paint, but then you have to get some of it off again. So what we're going to do over here is we're going to come down to the bottom, and we're going to make some more stamps like this, here and there. Okay, some of them are longer, like so. Don't be afraid to go into your petal like that. It's fine. If you're going over an area and it's dry, that's okay too. And notice how I'm doing it fast. What I'm doing is I'm pressing down and I pull. I press down and I pull in different areas. But notice how they're all going straight up and down, like, you know, up and down. They're not going sideways though. I'm not putting any in sideways because these are supposed to represent kind of leaves that are in the background and different things like that. Okay. And we'll put some more potent ones in a little bit later. And now we're going to go over here to our spring green color, and we're going to add some of those in too. And I'm going to do kind of a big press, called a big slap over here of these ones. Okay, big slaps mean press down hard so your brush spreads out more. I'm going to put a couple of them up here and there too, like this. Not do definitive, a couple little floater guys like that. Remember, go into your petals, don't avoid them. Okay, looks good. I like it. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and clean off our brush right now. Now, what we get to do here is fun. We are going to go ahead and use our long brush, our longest brush, whichever one you feel comfortable, like the one we used the other day, okay? This is a round brush. There are fancy brushes out there that are made specifically for doing this. And I'll show you what this looks like. I was actually gonna explain this in a demonstration later, but This might be the perfect time to do it now. Okay, so this is called a liner brush. And the reason is it's really good at making lines. And that's because look at this, look at those bristles. They're kind of stiff right now because they haven't been watered, put in the water and swirled around, but woo, look at how that would drag. Okay, so these are really good for lines, but you can use a round brush like a liner brush too. Since you don't have one of these, I'm not going to show you what it looks like because it won't be fair. You can't replicate that at home, okay? But I'm going to show you how to do it with a round brush. And a round brush is just one of these longer brushes like this. They kind of go down. They look like a little cylinder, like a little bottle, but then they get pointy at the top, okay? So it's rounded on the side instead of flat, and it comes to a point. And they also have ones that are flat on top. We're not going to use those today. So what we want to do is we want to take some of our green and we want to scoop it up with our big Filbert brush here. I'm going to take some of our spring green. I'm going to put it up over here, or you can put it on your piece of plastic or whatever it is that you're using, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get just a little bit of black, a little tiny nub of black. I'm just touching it, see? I'm going to add it there. And then I'm going to grab more blue and add it in. And I'm hoping to achieve kind of a dark greenish teal color. All right, there we go. We don't want to make it too bright though. If it's too bright color, see how it pops out before everything else? All right, and what we want to do is we want to add some water to it. So we're going to go here and we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to clean this brush off and put it off to the side, my Filbert brush. And I'm going to get my round brush. And remember, if yours is straight out of the package, you have to warm your brush up. Get it wet, move it around. So I'm going to go ahead and get it wet there, move it around. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to mix, 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 like so. And then I'm going to drag through like that. Okay. And then in the background, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to very gently drag lines like this. Drag them all around. And it's okay to drag them through your flower over here. Go ahead and just drag them all around. Some of them are longer. And I'm not pressing, see? I'm holding it like a little tiny teacup and I'm just wiggling it across the screen. I start them in different spots. It doesn't really matter where, because we're not trying to put that much detail into our background. It's fine. Start some over this way, drag them through. And if you're somebody who absolutely hates working with something that has an area that's been painted over it a little bit, that's okay. I'll show you a really simple way to get around that. You can just paint it white again. And you just have to wait a couple more minutes, like 3 more minutes. Okay. And then to help ourselves out again, down here to add a little more detail, we're gonna flick, flick, flick some of these different colors here, just to add some in. I'm setting it down and I'm flicking, 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 flicking. Setting it down and I'm flicking, flicking, flicking. Just like so. Have fun with it. Flick it. Bum, 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 bum. Psh, beep, psh, beep. When something comes along, you must flick it. For all your 80s fans. And I think I need a couple little guys up here somewhere. Okay. All right, I think that's pretty good for now. So what you're gonna wanna do for the next section is you're gonna wanna wait a couple of seconds until we do the next part. So this needs to be dry first before we move on, okay? But this area for me is already dry there, so I'll give you an example of what to do if you're the type of person who this is gonna drive wild. You don't like that, okay? Or if you made it really dark by accident, you put it through here, it might show through your paint a little bit if your paint's thin. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna clean off a brush, and I would take a completely clean brush of any kind you want, it doesn't really matter. I'm gonna take some white, and I'm just gonna gently pat it on top of here, like this. Pat, 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 pat and pull. Pat and pull, pat, 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 pat. And it won't cover it up 100%, but you don't need it 100%. You just need it like 60% covered. Pat, pat, pat. I'm going to do that everywhere where that color is showing up. And you only have to do this if your color is really dark, okay? Or if you just don't like the way it looks and it makes you uncomfortable when you're painting. Some people are very particular about that. There you go. Like so. Pat, pat, pat. Okay. We'll let that dry for a little while. And what we need to do next is we need to go ahead and put in some of these colors down here for our flowers. Okay, and the colors that we're going to have in our flowers, the big ones are kind of particular. So what we want to do here is we want to go ahead and get out our big Filbert brush. This guy right here, okay? And we're going to make those colors, but we are not going to paint until this background is dry. So if you're not sure, hey Jen, how do I know if my background is dry? Do not touch it. A lot of times people do that to figure out if it's dry, and then you'll pick your paint up and ruin some of your painting. Instead, go like this, move it around. Do you see shiny? If you do, it's not ready yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fast forward and I'm going to pause the video, and you can pause too and wait for a couple minutes. Discuss what you've done so far and how bokeh works, which is your blurry background, okay? And think about things that you can look at, like your hand, how when your hand is closer to you, you can see it well, and when it's farther away, you can't. And discuss that a little bit. Wait for your paint to dry, about 3 minutes to 5 minutes, and then go ahead and begin again. Pause your video now. Hey, we're back again. So, how did it go? Did you wait a little while? What did you discuss about bokeh? Hopefully you had some good discussion about it. There's some great resources out there on the internet like Google where you can go ahead and just put the words bokeh in and it'll go ahead and bring up some awesome stuff for you. And you're probably wondering how to spell bokeh. It's pretty strange. So it has an H in it and a B, and that's about all I know off the top of my head. Count down to 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're back. Thanks for waiting on the painting to dry. What we're going to do next is we're going to work on some of these colors over here that we need to make for our blurry little flowers in the background. So what we need is we need our red. We're going to go ahead and get a scoop of red and put it on a palette or on your garbage bag, wherever you have some room. And you won't need too much of it. Then you're going to make another one. This one you're going to have just a little bit, not too much. Okay? And then this guy over here, just a teensy little bit like that. Okay? So 3 different amounts. A lot, a little, and itty bitty. So what we're going to do here is go ahead and clean off our brush. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to make a dark. We're going to leave one as kind of a medium. We're going to make kind of an orangey color. So we're going to add a little bit of black to this red here. Make it a darker red, like this. Okay, so for these background here, what we need to do is we need to make some colors. So I made 3 little spots of red, and in this one I added some black to it, so I have a dark red. We don't want it to be like pitch black red, okay? That's not what we're shooting for. And then over here, we're gonna have a little bit of this. We're gonna take it and add it to this pile of red. Okay, so it's a little bit darker than a regular red. And we're gonna do the same thing right over here, teensy bit, okay? Mix that together. And the difference is here, I wanna get that extra off right there, is I'm gonna go ahead and put this right there so you can see it. When I add to it, don't normally mix your paint on your canvas, please. It's a bad idea. I'm just doing this so you can see it. I'm gonna take a big old scoop of yellow and add it to this one, and a little scoop and add it to that one. All right, so I'm gonna mix this guy up first, like that. So we should have a nice orange color. Okay, gonna get the extra off. Now I'm using multiple little palettes like this, and you can see this guy's just a cottage cheese lid. So there's great things that you can use around your house like that. Don't throw those things out. Okay, so I get that one mixed. I'm gonna go ahead and mix this one now. which is kind of a more reddish orange. All right, and then I have my regular dark kind of red there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and clean off my brush. I'm going to get the extra water off by remembering to squeeze it onto a paper towel and pull it through. Pull it through like you're pulling it through a little tunnel. Boop, like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to grab some of this. And I'm going to find the spots where it says blurry and lazy on this side, and I'm going to go like that, like that. I'm just going to kind of smush around like this. Smush. Don't worry about what it looks like. It's not supposed to look perfect, okay? Smush around like that. Smush. Same thing. Get some going up here. Smush. Smush. A little bit of smush. Some smush over here. And yours might be slightly different than mine when you get yours, just because it might be sketched just a teeny bit different where these are. But you can add some more into. If you're going to do that, you just want to smush here and smush. Make sure that you make weird shapes when you're doing it. Okay. Smush, 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 and smush. Okay, looks good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the other colors that we have, and we're going to go right in there, and we're going to smush again, just a little bit, little blop blop here and there, randomly. Don't think too hard about it. Blop blop, blop blop, blop blop. Get a little bit of the other color, blop blop blop. Same thing, blop blop blop. And what we're doing is we're adding a darker color and a medium color and a light color, which tells our brain, even if we're doing it real lazy in the background, it tells our brain that there's still different things going on. It's not just a flat little piece of paper in the background, okay? And then if you want to, you can add little flicks like this throughout here and there. That's a nice way of doing it too. A little bit here and there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Notice how I'm just kind of tapping, doing whatever with my brush. Not thinking about too hard, because the more we try to control a bokeh background, the worse it's going to look. Not that it's like bad, but it's just going to be something you're not going to be particularly happy with because it's going to not look right. Okay, so we're done with this for the second. We can put it off over here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start to paint in these colors down here. Okay, now if you look here, we talked about that before, that our background here, it says stipple in the middle. We already know from past painting, stippling is going straight up and down. And this back here are our directions of our brush strokes. So let's take a look there. And I'll help us out a little bit by drawing some of the brush strokes in here. I'm just doing it for the purpose for you can see, okay? I'm only going to put one or two of them in these areas, but yours isn't going to have the brush strokes drawn on it. You just have to look at your image here, okay? So bear with me, and it'll pop back up in a second like magic. Okay, so now that you've seen this, you see I added in a couple of these brush stroke lines here. That's going to give us the direction. So lines that show volume or size or shape of something are called contour lines. When they crisscross over each other, they're called cross contour because they cross each other. But we don't have any cross contour lines. We just have contour lines. So they're single lines next to each other that get closer or farther away based on the shape of something, whether it pops out at you or it's supposed to go away from you. So we're going to use those to tell us which direction to go with our brush strokes. So the first thing we want to do here is we're going to get regular old red. You guessed it, just regular old red. We're going to go in this one right here, okay, and we are going to go ahead and fill this one with red. And notice how when I'm doing it, I'm using the thick side of my brush. See, I'm just laying it down and I'm pulling it towards right up here, kind of treating it almost like a crayon, and or I'm sorry, a marker, and pulling it like this. And I'm letting the paint lay down little strips like that. That's okay. Like that. Okay? We're going to let that sit for a second. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint a little bit and mix a little bit of paint of some darker paint. So I'm going to put some red back here. Okay, and I'm going to get some black and mix it in there like this. So I get a darker red, almost like a mauve. And then I want to get the extra off because I don't want too much on there. I'm going to drag through, and I'm going to go to the bottom, and I'm going to flick up the same way that I just did with my brush, like this. And when I reach about the middle, I'm going to flick up like that. That's real important to make sure you flick up. Okay, I'm going to stop that for a second. And now this one down here, this is where it gets a little tricky, is going to be darker. Okay, so we're going to start this guy down like this. Down, 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 and see how I'm going about halfway, like this. I'm going to do this all the way around these petals. I can outline a little bit just so I can see easier. All the way around like that. Good. And this guy's going to be darker too. So we're going to go right here, and we're going to use our brush like this. I'm using my Filbert brush. I'm using the thick side like that, and I'm pulling up like that. So we're going to leave that guy like this for a second. Okay, while that guy's sitting, I'm going to clean off my brush. And the reason that we do it like this is because it's going to make it look like a cup like this, or it's going to make it look bent like that, depending on how we paint it. So next what I'm going to do is I cleaned off my brush. I don't have a lot of water in it. I'm going to dip it right in my red, and I'm going to start at the bottom and flick upward on this one, like that. Flicking up, like so. And I'm following the lines of my brush strokes there. There you go, looks good. See how the light and the dark are showing up? Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to clean off our brush. I'm going to get the extra water off. Don't use too much water because this paint's already thin. Dunk in, and I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to go down. Flick down, down, down into this one, down into the dark that we already put down there. Looks good, not bad so far. Now the sides over here are a little tricky. They have to be pretty dark because that's where this part is cupped down there. See how dark my hand gets? So we need to add a little bit more red here because I didn't make enough. Whoops. And I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of green to it. So I have to go over here and I have to get a little bit of green. Turns out I am out of green, so I have to make myself some. And you're probably thinking, well, why don't you buy some green, Jen? Wouldn't that make things easier? Yes, that's true, but I like to keep practicing my color mixing, and you should practice it too. So I'm going to get just a little bit of green there. It's a pretty green to begin with. Then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to mix it in like this. Get a little bit darker, grab a little bit more, mix it in. Ooh, that's a nice dark red. So then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to get underneath this and I'm going to paint this whole side of the petal all a dark red. It's okay, it'll make sense shortly. So the whole part of the petal is all dark red. Okay, and one thing we need to talk about too is that sometimes you build up how dark something is or light is with different layers, okay? So you don't always paint everything all at once. It's not always possible. Okay, so that's going to sit there for a second. And then our background down here is going to be dark too. So a little bit on the edges because it's starting to curl over. So we're going to go like this. We're going to outline it gentle. I turn my brush sideways and I flick, 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 flick. Flick, 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 flick. Downward like that. Okay, I'm going to get off the extra, wipe off your brush. We don't need it, not a big deal. go ahead and get some of your regular red, and we're going to go underneath here and pull up a little bit like that and go around like so. There we go. Now the edge is kind of disappearing a little bit because the colors are blending together, but that's all right. We're going to do something about that shortly. All right, so we have to let that sit for a second, that petal we did. Instead, we're going to go back over and we're going to add another layer here because this is dry. So I'm going to add some red back down here like this, and some red back down here like this, regular red at the top. Okay, and then I'm going to add some at the bottom down here like this. All right, I'm going to let that sit for a minute. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to plain old paint in just regular red on these petals. And notice that your petals over here have this design. They go like this, and then they get straight, and then they curve out again like that. So you want to do that when you're making these ones, like this, and then they curve out like this, and then they curve out. And it's okay that you didn't finish your edges because we're going to come back in and make some of those a little darker. Right now, I'm going to grab a little bit of this dark color right on my one side, and I'm going to flick in like that on the edges of my petals. Make a little line of it, then flick in like so. Good. See how it separates in the paint? Doesn't that look kind of cool? And then this one, I want it to be a little bit darker on this side, like it's turned. So I do it in the middle, and then a little bit at the edges like this. Get off the extra, because there's a lot of paint on there. You don't want to work with too much paint. And then I pull down a little bit more like that. I can always go back and add some brightness into it later. A little bit there. We'll let that sit for a bit. Okay? Now, what we want to do here is we want to go in and darken these areas one more time. Go right here, underneath, up, using our brush strokes. And then over here, what we have that in, we can turn our brush sideways and use those brush strokes like this. Go into our red, and so it's going to bring some back down and forward like that. We're going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to go pat in our dark color on this one right there and pull downward, turn our brush sideways, make little flicks like that. It's going to pull some of the paint with it and expose some of the stuff underneath. Perfect, that's what we want. Okay, and then back here one more time on this guy, flick up like so. This guy here, flick down, flick down. When I say flick, flicking is going, pulling towards something and going whoop like that, or whoop, depending on the way you're pulling your brush. All right, and then right there, we're going to go ahead and put this in as all dark. And we're going to use our brush strokes pattern right here, which starts from there and goes upward like that. Okay, now we're going to go over to this one right up the top while these are drying. And then on this side, right down there, you can see over here that there's these lines and they go up. So we're going to go up like this. We're still going to try to keep our shape. We'll round out the edge a little bit. And then we're going to do the same thing over here. So right there on this petal, up, like so. Okay. And then on this one here, we're just going to make this guy all a dark red. Okay, so let him just be all dark red. I'm going to go ahead and wash off our brush. And you're doing very well, by the way, if you're following along. Remember that it's okay to make mistakes in painting. If you don't like it, you can just paint some white over it and paint over again. Or you can fix a spot. Painting's pretty forgiving like that. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get some regular red right there, dunk it in. And then just like we did before, wherever there's dark in the bottom, it must be light on the top. So we're pulling down that petal there. Gonna go across the top and pull down there. Okay, looks good. And just to help out our bokeh a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of some pure red into some of these flowers that are around us. Like that. We don't want too much here and there. We want these flowers to be the focus, the ones that are in the front like that. Okay. All right. Oh, I missed this little guy there, I think. Very good. So we're going back over here. We're going to add the last layer of this regular red there, like that. And if you think you have enough, you can skip that layer. You'll be able to tell if you can see through your canvas too well. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to fill in this area, flicking up like so. Going back and forth. All right, so what we need to do now is we need to wait a second, clean off our brush. Okay, clean your brush off. And while that's happening, those are drying a little bit. We want to wait till your paint gets sticky. And what I mean by sticky is when you look at it, it's still glossy, but it doesn't look like a pile of water in some places. It just looks a little shiny. Okay, so I have a couple of juicy spots, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend that I'm waiting. If you see some juiciness, you want to wait a couple minutes, okay? So wait about 3 minutes. Sometimes painting is about waiting too and being patient. If you're patient for painting, it'll be patient for you and give you beautiful things. So let's go ahead and wait a couple moments. Okay, so you're back now. What we're going to do is we're going to make a lighter color, and it's going to be kind of a pinkish color. So we need to take some red and add it on to your palette somewhere. My colors are dry right now, so I don't have to worry about them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to need a little bit of white over here, because pink is made with red and white, you guessed it. And I'm going to mix those together like that. There you go. Looks pretty good. Nice. A nice pink color, not too bright, not too dark. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the spots where the light's going to hit. Okay, so if it's bent, let's take a look at my fingers and my whole hand. Which part is the brightest? The middle, where the knuckles are, because that's the part that's closest to you. So anything on these flowers that's the closest to you on that particular petal is going to be brightest. So for us, that means this area right here. So I turn my brush sideways, like that. Okay, I'm using the thin way and I'm just making little dashes like that. For the top part right here of this one, we're going to go ahead and make kind of a smushy line like this. Make a dashed line that goes all the way around this petal. That's because it's kind of turned towards us a little bit. Like so. Nice job. Now we're going to come over here towards the top of this one, and we're going to put a little bit down that way. Going down. I need a little bit more white in this, I think. There we go. That's better. That's a better pink. I think my color was too dark there for a moment. All right, now we can see it on there. Go ahead and add some here like this. Add some there like that. And I'm using my brush strokes and I'm turning it sideways like this. Okay. And what we want to do is we want to massage that in a little bit. So we get off our extra paint, push it off of your brush, turn it the thick way, and we're going gentle back and forth like you're petting a nice little cat. You don't want to be too rough with it. Okay, get the extra off. Do the same thing there. This is called blending. Good, nice job. You're doing pretty good. Okay, now can add a little bit back in there of brightness, like there, because I kind of washed mine out a little bit. Same thing, you can do that too. A couple of those little dots like that, little dashes. All right, so I'm going to move on over here, and I'm going to bring it down with our brush strokes, turning my brush sideways and pulling down like so. Good, there we go. Get some over here, on this side, and it's actually, the light's catching it pretty well down here, because this is going to turn over. We need a little bit like that. There you go. And then we need some over here. We need some on the brightest part of our petal going downward like that. And we need some right up here. Going downward. And then we need some right here too. Can't forget about this part of the petal. And turn our brush sideways and little pulls, remember? Pull, 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 pull towards the middle. Good. Did you know that you're almost done right now with your flowers? What we're going to do here is we're going to put this brush in your water. And what I want for you to do is get out your flat brush. So it should look like this, your big flat brush, not your little one. Get it wet. Get the extra water off of it. Squeeze it gently, not over your canvas like I did. You don't want to do that. And then take a little bit of water. And a little bit of paint. And then what you're going to do here is you're going to dance it along the edges of your petals like this. Just plop, plop, plop. Don't put a lot on there. Make sure there's just a teensy bit at the top. See? If I turn it that way, you can see. Wow, a little bit. And you're going to do that just on the edges of those petals. Like that. Okay, you can do the same thing on the other ones. A little bit up there, a little bit up there. Good, and then you want to go ahead and do that to some of the ones that are out here too. Just add in little bits of white like that. Make sure you turn it when you're doing it. Turn, turn, turn it. Here and there. So it'll look like detail, but not too much. Okay, and then same thing. You can actually add some of those through the middle of these guys probably. Some dashes like that. And then some at the end. All right. Good job. All right, so if you have all that in there, oh, I forgot this little guy back there. We want to make sure to go ahead and clean off our brush, because what we're going to do here, we have two small last things we need to do. We need to make a couple of stems, and then we need to finish the inside with stippling. Okay? Count down to 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to do some stems. So we need blue and we need yellow. So we can make a nice green, like so. A good green. That's very good. Okay, so this is a cool little art trick. So what you're going to do is you're going to get the extra off like this. Okay, don't keep any on that side. Pull it through your brush. Okay, so it's just flavored like that. And what you're going to do is you're going to go over to your white and you're going to pull through your white like this. So it's just on one side. That's important. Okay, and then you're going to use another part of your palette somewhere over here like this and kind of smooth it out like that. Okay, now flip over your brush so the white part's on top, green's on bottom, and drag through here like this. And what this is going to do is it's going to make stripes on your brush. So watch this. We start here, we set it down, and we pull. Look at that. Now you have a nice stripe going right there. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to pull through the white on this side, get some green on this side again, and pull, pull. Okay, you can do that for a couple little spots there, maybe this guy right there. Good. And what I like to do is I like to go in there and then grab some color in general, just kind of mix it together like this. And really kind of highlight that a little bit, make it thicker, like that. Now we're going to add just the tiniest bit of blue over here. Then we're going to get a little bit of black and we're going to mix it together, because blue appears when it's mixed like this in a green with a little bit of black, appears as a darker color without using black. There we go, look at that. Put it there. I'm turning my brush sideways, and notice how I'm making some of these have little stems, but just a couple of them. Okay, like so. This little guy there needs some love. Going up there. And if you really want to, you can turn your brush sideways like this and throw in a couple of those color here and there, just a little bit. I wouldn't put in too much. All right, looks good. Now our very last thing for our painting is our stippling. And we're going to want to go back to our Filbert brush. And I'm going to use a little Filbert brush this time. So little Filbert is just a small version of the Filbert brush. Any brush that is flat on the sides like this, except it's rounded at the top. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to grab a little bit of yellow all by its lonesome, and I'm going to smush around this circle here. Just make some little stabby marks like that, stipples, like that in the middle. I'm going to do it around here in a circle there. I'm going to put a little bit up here. And then if you want to, you can add a little dash here and there in your lazy flowers in the background to pull it together. Just little lazy dashes. That's all you need. Not a lot. Now clean off your brush. Make sure you get the water out, because remember, when we're doing stippling, most of the time we do not use a lot of water. Okay? Grab a little bit of your black, go straight back down into your black. And then in the middle, that's where we add in the stipple marks there. Make sure to stay in your spot there. Don't go too far outside of it. And then go a little tiny bit into your yellow and then dance back and forth. Same thing over there. Dancing back and forth. Dancing back and forth. And if you want to, you can go right next to your yellow wherever you put some. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just kind of place a little black next to it. And then you are done. Not too bad, right? Nice job today. And remember, if you get frustrated as always with painting, it's no big deal. You can just paint over something if you don't like it. You can wait for it to dry. And remember, painting takes practice. This is a beginner painting, and it's not meant to be super realistic. It's getting you to understand how this works and how brush strokes work. So remember, we had a bokeh background. We had our lazy flowers and our blurry flowers, right? Then we have ones that get closer to us, right here, which is our flower there, okay? And this one here, and look at the brush strokes there. If you want to, one of the last things you can do, if you feel like it, is you can add a little bit of a real dark red into this. So if you want to, the next part, the very last part of the painting, if you even want to, is optional, and I'll just show you how it makes it pop out a bit. So it takes about 3 minutes to do, okay? It goes like this, where you're going to go ahead and get your little Filbert brush, the one we used for the stipple just a moment ago. Remember, you don't have to do this. This is not part of the painting. This is just being if you want to add a little bit more depth, making it look a little bit closer to you. So you get your red, you get a little bit of black, a little bit of blue, mix it all together, and hopefully you're getting a real dark purple, a real dark purple. Now what you're going to do with that is you don't want a ton of it. This is called dry brushing, and it requires you to be patient and have a delicate hand. So what you're going to do is you're going to go underneath here in your petal, and you're gently going to use those brush strokes pulling up. pulling upward, like that. So if you do it like this and your painting's dry and you're moving these in the correct manner, see how it's starting to make it pop out even more? You do not need a lot. It's really important that when you use a dry brush that it's dry because you have very little paint on it, okay? So I'm gonna go over here in this area there. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna dry brush upward, like this, using my brush strokes and the shape that we talked about over here. I'm going to do the same thing on each one of these. You don't need a lot because it's not a very dark painting. Oops, need a little bit more than that. Pulling up like that. And the same thing in the background. Wherever you had over there, you have to do it for this guy too, the one in the bottom, because he's not seeing a lot of light. Just like the one up above him. Looks good. And I think all we're missing is a little bit on this one here. A little bit of darkening there, like so. And you can do that wherever you have your darkest parts. So if you have some over here, get the extra. And we don't always use black. In fact, a lot of the times when we're painting, we do not use black, pure black. We only use it to mix with things. Very rarely do you see pure black in something. It's just too dark. Too dark for painting. You can do a little bit over here. And this part where it's a little bit darker. Dry brush over there. Same thing. This little guy here where the deepest, darkest part is of the petal. A little bit over there. A little bit over here maybe. And that's it. Ta-da! You're all done. I hope you had fun today. I hope you learned a little bit about how color works again. I hope you learned about bokeh, and I hope you learned about our foreground. Don't forget about stippling, which is up and down. Your brush strokes are really important. They tell a story, right? They tell shape. Brush strokes tell a lot. It's not just about the color that you put down, it's about how you drag your color around. So if you have any questions about this video, you know where to reach out. Look forward to painting with you again and teaching you some more about painting. Good job. Keep up the good work. Don't get discouraged if you have trouble. Remember, in art, mistakes make it happen. So if you make a mistake, that just means you're building tools and knowledge in your painting, drawing, sculpture library, whatever you do in art. The more mistakes you make at first, the better you are later. All right, see you next time. Thanks for joining us at DSI Art Education.